For decades, he was a ghost. He crept into homes at night, he tied people up, took control, and then vanished without a trace. He terrorized California for over a decade, then he simply disappeared. 13 murders, over 50 rapes, hundreds of break-ins. No one knew who he was. No fingerprints, no witnesses, just fear. This is the story of how one of America's most elusive criminals was finally brought to justice, a mystery that haunted the country for more than 40 years, and how the FBI, using a brand new kind of science, caught the Golden State Killer. He went by many names: the Visalia Ransacker, the East Area Rapist, the original Night Stalker. Each nickname represented a new phase of terror, a new location, and a trail of broken lives. But the man behind them all was just one person. Between 1974 and 1986, he became one of the most feared predators in America. He studied his victims, knew their routines. Sometimes, he even called them before or after the attacks. He was patient, calm, and terrifyingly methodical. He started small, petty theft, peeping into windows, but it escalated. Soon he was breaking into homes. Then came the assaults, then the killings. He evolved with every crime, becoming bolder, smarter, more brutal, and then he vanished. But how could someone so dangerous just disappear? The attacks began in Sacramento in 1976. Late at night, a masked man would slip into homes. He'd shine a flashlight in his victims' eyes. Then came the rope, the threats, the trauma. He didn't just attack, he psychologically shattered his victims. He'd place dishes on a man's back and say if he heard them move while he was in the other room, they'd both die. It wasn't just violence, it was domination, control. He watched them, listened to them, knew things about them. In many cases, he had scoped out their homes days, sometimes weeks, in advance. And the scariest part, he always seemed one step ahead of the police. As time passed, his crimes escalated. By 1979, the scene changed, the violence increased, the victims started turning up dead. He moved from Northern California to southern cities like Goleta and Irvine. And with each crime, the fear followed. Couples were found brutally murdered. Neighbors reported strange sounds, screams in the night, doors creaking open, dogs barking endlessly. He left behind almost nothing, sometimes a shoelace, a partial footprint, a strange phone call before or after, but never enough to catch him. Eventually the attacks stopped, at least that's what everyone thought. For decades the media struggled to connect the dots. Was the Visalia Ransacker the same man as the East Area Rapist? And were they the same person as the original Night Stalker? The crimes shared a pattern: night attacks, bindings, sexual assault, then murder. But the locations were miles apart, and the time frames didn't always line up. It wasn't until DNA testing entered the picture in the late 1990s and early 2000s that the truth began to emerge. The same DNA showed up in multiple crime scenes from Sacramento to Ventura. It was the same man, the same monster. He finally had a name, the Golden State Killer. But still, no identity. Years passed, detectives retired, leads dried up, but not everyone gave up. One of the most determined investigators was Paul Holes, a criminalist and cold case expert from Contra Costa County. Holes spent nearly 2 decades obsessed with catching the Golden State Killer. He believed DNA would eventually lead them to the killer. But there was one big problem: his DNA wasn't in any known database. They had the killer's genetic code, but no match. So Holes and his team turned to something brand new, something controversial, something no one had tried before in a criminal case: genetic genealogy. What's that? In simple terms, it's using a person's DNA to find their relatives through public ancestry databases. Think of it like this: if your cousin uploads their DNA to a genealogy site and you commit a crime and leave your DNA at the scene, investigators could use your cousin's results to find you. That's what Holes and his team did. In 2018, they uploaded the killer's DNA to a public site. They didn't find him, but they found distant relatives, second and third cousins. From there, genealogist Barbara Ray Venter helped build out a massive family tree. They traced it back generations, sifted through birth records, marriage certificates, obituaries, census reports, thousands of names, hundreds of branches, but slowly the web narrowed until one name stood out. Joseph James DeAngelo. He was in his 70s, a former police officer, had lived in many of the areas where the attacks took place. He checked every box, but they still needed a direct DNA sample. So the FBI launched surveillance. They watched him, followed him, collected his trash. Then they got what they needed, a discarded tissue from his garbage. It was sent to the lab. The results came back. It matched. After more than 40 years, the Golden State Killer finally had a name. Joseph James DeAngelo was arrested outside his home in Citrus Heights, California on April 24, 2018. The news shocked the nation. Neighbors were stunned. He was just a quiet old man who kept to himself. But inside his home, investigators found disturbing signs. Surveillance-style maps, tools, mementos, even writings that hinted at his twisted mindset. He had lived a double life, husband, father, veteran police officer, and one of the most prolific criminals in American history. The courtroom was packed. Victims and their families filled the seats. Many spoke, some sobbed, others sat in silence. DeAngelo said nothing. He showed no emotion. But as victim after victim stood to confront him, the truth became undeniable. He had ruined lives, stolen futures, haunted dreams. One survivor said, "You never thought we'd catch you, but we did." DeAngelo eventually pled guilty to 13 counts of murder and numerous other charges. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He will die behind bars. But what kind of mind does something like this? DeAngelo's background revealed disturbing clues. He'd been arrested for shoplifting in the 1990s, fired from the police force in the late 70s. Some say his crimes began as revenge. Others believe he simply craved control. He stalked his victims, watched them for weeks, broke into their homes beforehand to unlock windows, unload guns, leave ligatures behind. He was calculating, precise. He made himself invisible. Psychologists describe him as a classic organized offender, intelligent, methodical, remorseless. But his secret life eventually unraveled, thanks to science, thanks to persistence, thanks to people who never gave up. The Golden State Killer case changed how we catch criminals. It was the first major arrest using genetic genealogy. Since then, this technique has solved over 100 cold cases. But it also raised big questions. Is it ethical to use public DNA databases this way? Should police have access to family trees built for fun? Privacy advocates say it's a slippery slope, but victims' families say it's justice. In the end, this is more than a story about a killer. It's a story about determination, about how one case sparked a revolution in forensics, and about how a man who once thought he'd never be caught was finally unmasked. Because of science, because of courage, because someone refused to forget. What do you think? Should DNA from genealogy sites be used more often to solve cold cases? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell.